I don't know about you, but it feels to me like every time I turn around, there's another neo-retro, new wave, something trotted out for me to have a look at. The last 12 months in particular seem to have been nothing but retro bikes. Moto Guzzi, Ducati, Triumph, everyone. I get them. I know some people at home think because I have a beard, I must be some kind of crazy hipster. I'm not. I'm the editor at Superbike magazine. I live for sports bikes. I'm just going bold. Having a beard just makes up for going bold, apparently. But here we are, Triumph Bonneville Bobber, another retro bike, and another bike that I'm about to say, but wait, this one's worth looking at. This bike really, really is worth a look. The format with most launches is you get on an aeroplane, you go to a sunny country, you go and sit in a room, they tell you all about the bike, you put your kit on, you go and ride. With Triumph it's different. We haven't really had a chance to get to know the bike from the inside out. We started on the outside and done a couple of 100 miles on it before they've even told us what the spec is and what's going on inside. So lots of people think that being a bike journalist is all about endless streams of free kit. It's called the Blag. I'm not really a fan of the Blag. I've also left my little woolly base veil at home. So I've improvised, adapted and overcome with a pair of Next boxer shorts. Available in all good Next stores. I'm spotting a little bit of a gap in the market. Also, if you've got a mullet, you can tuck your mullet out the back. Anyone can rough it. It was freezing cold this morning. It's my own fault. Left my kit at home. I want a pair of pants. 300 quid carbon fibre Roland Sands Talladega helmet and a pair of underpants. We've stopped now after maybe an hour and 20 minutes of riding. Really foggy, freezing cold at the start. Heated grips, big plus point, didn't know it had that. My initial thoughts are, I'm really surprised. I was expecting a halfway house in between a Diavel, which is that kind of out and out performance cruiser, and a Harley Davidson 48. It doesn't really handle like either of those bikes. I thought it would be long and lazy in the corners. We've had a couple of switchbacks, some really nice twisty roads. It just tucks straight into them. I think not having a big showboat rear tyre at the back means that the transition from left to right is very, very easy. The motor, I think, is more suited to a bike like this than the original T120 Bonneville that it's been lifted from. The compromises that they had to make with that bike mean it needs to be happy touring, it needs to be happy two-up. This bike, it's quite a selfish thing really, it's just you and the bike. There is no real capacity for a pillion, there is no real capacity for luggage that's any use. So that means they've been able to make a few tweaks to the motor. Gearing stays the same, final drive stays the same, ratios are all the same, but there's just something more in the motor in this setup than there is in the original T120. I'm having a really, really good time. I'm still finding my feet with it. A couple of times I expected it to push me wide from the apex on the way out of corners, like a Diavel would or like a longer cruiser would. And it's not really doing that. It's just tucking in, holding a line. You don't have to force the thing in and hold it into corners. It just runs through, gives you a chance to really wind the gas on early and have some fun. I'm really surprised so far. I'm having a brilliant day. So we've had the presentation, now we know a little bit more about the bike. What we're looking at is the single overhead cam, 8-valve, liquid cooled, parallel twin, lifted straight from T120 Bonneville. It isn't just a freaky part spin special, everything else that surrounds that motor is new. So the chassis is specific to this bike, the suspension is specific to this bike. Pretty much everything is specific to this bike. including the tune that the motor has. There's been some adaptations to intake and exhaust, so the bike just feels a little bit peppier than the T120 Bonneville. At 4,500 revs, it makes 10% more power and torque than the T120 Bonneville as well. The numbers, 106 newton meters of torque and about 77 PS. What is that? 75, 76 horsepower. Makes pretty good power, makes pretty good torque. But when you're out on your own, on it, the numbers don't really do it justice. So you get really quite simple stuff. The brakes are basic 2-piston calipers on a single disc. A couple of times out on the road, I thought that it could probably do with a little bit more brake. Maybe that's just because I've been spoilt for the last few years. I didn't overrun a single corner, didn't outbrake myself once, stopped every time. Feel that the lever was pretty good once I'd made some adjustments. It has enough brakes for the bike. Traction control, multiple riding modes, rain and road. There is no sport or anything like that, but it doesn't cut any kind of power. You get the same power in both modes, you just get a different kind of delivery. A 6-speed gearbox with Triumph Assist clutch. It's ladylike at the lever, that's what it is. It's really, really light. Gearbox super slick all day. Clutchless on the way up was fine, full gas changes. Ratios are really well matched to the motor and matched to the style of bike. Identical, by the way, to T120 Bonneville, even down to the final drive. The tyres, Avon Cobras, I think it's the first time they've done a radial fitment for that Avon. Best Avons I've ridden in as long as I can remember. The tyres work well with everything else as well. And also that rear profile on the tyre, I think it's a 150. It really does suit the nature of the bike. It makes it very, very easy to turn in. You don't have to hold the thing into a corner like you normally do on a cruiser that has a big fat stupid rear tyre. It's an easy bike to ride, and it was actually a whole lot more agile than we expected. That weird looking swing arm is actually called a swing cage, and it's all part of the original bobber style, which is, hopefully now while I'm doing this with my finger, the Magic Men at Bike World will show you a side-on profile of the bike, and you can see that line that runs from the headstock all the way down to the sprocket on the rear wheel. And it's all about having that line, a single floating seat that looks like a hardtail. That's what bobbing is all about, having a hardtail, having a sore ass. Fortunately for us now, Triumph are able to work in a monoshock, and they're actually calling the swing arm a swing cage. So the whole rear end of the bike moves up and down like this on the monoshock that's hidden under that sweet looking floating seat. So on the stock pipes, this bike sounds absolutely banging. One of the technicians yesterday mentioned that 90 miles an hour in fifth, apparently 90 miles an hour, nobody's ever done more than the national speed limit, but apparently 90 miles an hour in fifth is the best pitch and tone for these twin skin 2x2 pea shooter style exhausts. Triumph claim the tank in optimum conditions is good for about 138 miles. We did 75 miles yesterday and the thing was gasping for fuel. Don't get me wrong, we were not riding how bobbers should be ridden, so I would imagine it's got about 100 mile realistic real world tank range. I'm not supposed to like all these stupid retro bikes that keep popping up, but I'd have one of these. I'd have 2 of these. I probably have 3 of them. This Ruby Red is my favourite one. They do one in Moonstone Grey. They do one in this really trick British Racing Green and Silver two-tone, and they do Jet Black. In terms of price, the Jet Black one is the one that they gave us the details on yesterday. That's the one that you can walk in and buy on the showroom floor in February. That's when the bikes will be available. £10,500. So I really like the mix of brushed and polished aluminium. I really like the way they've stashed the key down on the right hand side. I really like the accessory heated grips that they fitted to the bikes that we rode yesterday. The button is tiny and it's tucked into the bars. Everything is integrated and smooth, and it's been considered, and men that are far more intelligent than I have had lots and lots of meetings about making these bits and pieces work together as well as they do. It's just another example of Triumph getting something absolutely on the money.